Hello, and thank you for joining this week's episode of Unconventional. I'm Eni Marchetti, the Legislative and Policy Director of the Justice Action Network. And today we're joined by two criminal justice experts and advocates, Rachel Rossi and Brett Tolman. We will be talking about some key issues that are facing our country in criminal justice reform and why it's so important for Congress to act to address these issues. So first, I'd like to introduce our panelists. Rachel Rossi is a former public defender serving in LA County. She then went on to hold key positions on Capitol Hill, including for Senator Dick Durbin and Chairman Jerry Nadler, playing a critical role in passing the First Step Act. And most recently, she ran for district attorney in LA. We also have Brett Tolman, who is the former U.S. Attorney for the District of Utah. He is a deeply respected law enforcement leader, and his voice is critical to the conservative movement for criminal justice reform. He's been instrumental to the passage of the First Step Act, the Fair Chance Act, and many other pieces of federal and state legislation. So first, I wanted to talk a little bit about the tragedy of coronavirus in our prisons and jails. This week, our country surpassed 200,000 deaths from COVID-19. And prisons and jails have been extreme hotbeds of the coronavirus with over 200,000 cases and at least 1,200 deaths. To help address this issue, in March, the Justice Action Network assembled the COVID-19 Emergency Task Force. This task force has had officials from 15 different states, including public defenders, prosecutors, sheriffs, and more. The task force, which both Rachel and Brett served on, came up with several recommendations that would help safely reduce incarceration and also help stem the spread of coronavirus in prisons and jails. So these reforms include things such as Congress supporting states and localities who are trying to safely reduce their prison and jail populations, and also helping support states that are releasing elderly, pregnant, and other vulnerable individuals, and also trying to make it easier for people exiting prison to find jobs. So my first question is to Rachel. Can you tell us a little bit about what is going on with coronavirus in jails and prisons and why it has gotten to this level? And also, there's a bill called the Correctional Facility Emergency Response Act. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how that would help?
Yes, and thank you, Eni Mine. Thank you to the Justice Action Network for having me. I'm very pleased to join Brett Tolman, such a distinguished colleague in this conversation. And you said it right, the numbers are really scary when we look at how many people are getting infected and dying of COVID-19 in our prisons and jails. In California, we've seen that the infection rate in our prisons is 514% higher than in California as a whole. And our death rate in prisons is 60% higher than in California as a whole. And, you know, when you look at how prisons and jails operate and what they are, it just makes sense that it's a hotbed for the virus to spread. You just don't have the same capability to follow CDC recommendations when it comes to, social distancing, hand washing, masks. A lot of these things that some of us may complain about on the outside are things that people who are incarcerated don't have access to and don't have the luxury to make the decision to do in order to protect themselves and keep themselves healthy. So legislation like that this task force worked on, and the Correctional Facility Emergency Response Act specifically would focus on these local prisons and jails and would provide federal resources to help the states and the local governments to decarcerate safely. The bill focuses on vulnerable populations, people who are not high risk to the community, and essentially tries to help local governments to get those people out of custody safely and to provide the resources to make it happen. It also focuses on the front end. When you look at law enforcement arresting people, the bill also focuses on ways to incentivize cite and release rather than locking people up at that critical stage if they don't pose a threat to society. So, we've seen Congress pass a little bit of help for the federal prison population. And it was small, but it was something. But we haven't seen this effort passed to assist our local governments in what they've been trying to do, which is to safely decarcerate, to save lives.
Sorry, I was on mute. So thank you for that. Brett, I think most people would be surprised to learn that law enforcement does support reforms like this and that these reforms are in the interest of public safety. Can you talk a little bit about why these types of reforms actually do help support public safety and law enforcement?
Sure. It's good to be with you, Nimai, and very good to be with Rachel. I was really pulling for her in her race and talked to a few people. I sure hope that there's lots of public office ahead of you. We need great voices like yours, Rachel. I'm honored to be with all of you and have a discussion about this. Sometimes people are surprised that law enforcement leaders, prosecutors, police officers, police chiefs get to a point where they are embracing and even pushing for criminal justice reform. In this particular instance, I think Rachel articulated the problem perfectly, and that is, look, we are over incarcerating people on the front end, and we're incarcerating them longer than they need to be incarcerated. That presents an enormous burden on your local sheriff or your jailers or your prison population for the ability to even handle that when COVID isn't an issue. Now, add to it the same incarceration rate, the overcrowded facilities, and you start to see why people who care about a criminal justice system that works, whether they be conservative or progressive, that they are jumping in and saying, hey, we need to do something about it. And right now, I mean, you look at states across the country, Mississippi and California, even Utah's had issues. Everybody is grappling with the fact that coronavirus is infecting at a higher rate, and the mortality rate is even higher in the prison populations. So to me, it shouldn't be a political issue. This should be an issue that if you care about having an effective criminal justice system, let's take a look at all our policies. Let's look at how we're incarcerating people. Is it something they need to be incarcerated for? Are we incarcerating them simply because we can? Or are we incarcerating just the dangerous individuals as opposed to everybody? And are we utilizing resources properly to try to avoid these sort of hotbeds or petri dishes of infection that are going on? And for me, that's an easy calculation anyway. I think that everybody who cares about the criminal justice system should be caring about each individual. Just because they committed a crime doesn't mean they should be at risk of a death sentence.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. So, Brett, on that note, there are a few additional bills before Congress as well, and I'm hoping you can give us a layman's description of what those are and why they're so critical. And those are the Paycheck Protection Second Chance Act, the Safer Detention Act, and the Clean Slate Act.
Yeah, I mean, the Paycheck Protection Act is very simple. I mean, we want individuals to be rehabilitated when they come out of prison, and so they are. And they're doing a great job, and many of them are running businesses. But currently, the fact that they have a prior conviction is eliminating their ability to be able to utilize the resources that the Treasury Department is releasing to try to help companies and businesses get through. To me, this one is outrageous, and it's outrageous because we are setting the message when we prosecute somebody that all we want them to be is contributing members of society. So then they do that. They come out. They form a business. They hire people. They're contributing to their community, and then we say, oh, but you know what? We're going to again single you out. You haven't done anything wrong since you were in jail, but we're going to single you out, and you can't take advantage of resources that we are extending to companies. So that one, to me, is easy, but of course with Congress, nothing is. On the Safer Detention Act, this one, just in its simple terms, this is the ability for an individual that's incarcerated in the federal system to be able to file a motion, to do it quickly, to articulate that they are at risk or that they are susceptible to coronavirus, and that they can immediately go to the judge and they can identify these vulnerable populations, and that judges can transition them into either halfway house or home confinement, and that alleviates a lot of the burden. I hope states will do that. Many states are starting to implement such measures, and I know there's a state, for example, in Mississippi, they are considering expanding who can receive parole, giving more authority, simply because they know that the coronavirus is affecting the population. So I think those are appropriate measures. This would be on the federal level. And then finally, the Clean Slate Act is a lot of people don't know that if you get a federal conviction, Rachel knows this, you get a federal conviction, there's no expungement, there's no ability to restore your rights. Congress has utterly failed at addressing that issue. So this is a very modest proposal that would automatically seal low-level offenses and allow for the individual to petition for his or her record to be sealed. And that's a baby step, but it's a step in the right direction. We have to start somewhere.
So I want to transition now to something that obviously has been in the news this week, but not necessarily related to criminal justice reform. So with the passing of Justice Ginsburg, Congress is expected to be locked up in a partisan battle over the next Supreme Court justice. My question to both of you is, if Congress does focus exclusively on the court seat and puts off its other business, such as these bills, what do we lose? What's at stake if Congress doesn't act this year to address criminal justice reform?
Yeah, so, I will say, as a preliminary matter, the Supreme Court justice seat is also very important when it comes to criminal justice reform. And that seat is a crucial battle for us to be focusing on in Congress right now. But we are at a time right now where we have a global pandemic that is devastating our communities and devastating our incarcerated communities and the most marginalized in our society. As much as it is on the plate of Congress, Congress cannot forget all of these efforts that must be moved in order to help the local governments, in order to really focus on ways that we can save lives during this COVID-19 pandemic. We've also seen that it is disproportionately impacting people of color. And these are issues that cannot be ignored, that cannot just be scrapped and tabled till the next Congress. If we don't focus on decarceration now, we will see an increase in coronavirus infection rates and deaths, and it is on Congress to take action as soon as they can.
Yeah, I'll echo those words as well. It'd be nice to see, both in the presidential debates as well as the nomination of a Supreme Court justice, that criminal justice reform and fixing a lot of the broken aspects of the criminal justice systems across this country would become front and center. That's not just because I'm an advocate that I'm asking for that. It's because we are at a crisis level in so many areas of the criminal justice system that have been ignored and that we have failed to reform, that it needs to be. And I think, polls show that it is a significant part of people. I think about 1 in 4 adults in this country has a criminal record. 1 in 4. And so it's an issue that's not going away. It's an issue that is affecting families. So I agree. I'd also like to see Congress actually be more than just a one-trick pony. It'd be great if they actually felt like they could do more than one thing. And I mean, all of us have to. So how about them? How about committees and how about senators and members of the House pushing legislation that is still a priority regardless of what's going on in one committee, the Judiciary Committee?
Yeah, I wanted to then transition to another topic that has been in the news, which is policing reform. It has been at the top of voters' minds and the country's mind for the last several months, if not years. Specifically wanted to talk about this issue of no-knock warrants. This is also something pending, but Congress has yet to act. So Rachel, can you tell us just in layman's terms what exactly no-knock warrants are, how they're executed, and why they pose such dangers?
Absolutely. So generally, the Constitution requires that when law enforcement has a warrant, they have to knock and announce themselves. They have to say, police, we're here at your door. But there are exceptions that allow law enforcement to get approval from a judge to get what's called a no-knock warrant, meaning they're allowed to show up, sometimes plain clothes, not announce who they are, and force entry into a home. Historically, I think why these warrants were created was this focus on exigent circumstances. What if the person inside is going to throw away the drugs? What if the person inside is going to run? But what we've historically seen is that it can really create a dangerous situation when you're forcing your way, battering ram, guns drawn into someone's home, and they don't know who you are. It can create a very scary, hostile situation and dangerous for law enforcement as well, because you never know who the people in that home, what they have, and what they're perceiving when you're coming at them, especially when oftentimes these warrants will be served very late at night, very early in the morning when people are asleep. If you think about it, what if you're in your bed sleeping and you hear your door being banged down and someone coming into your home and you don't even know that it's police? What are you going to do, right? And so this is why it's sort of become on the forefront of the conversation, specifically with what happened with Breonna Taylor. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that name. And in that case, there was an actual no-knock warrant signed by a judge that allowed law enforcement to not announce themselves. And you see the devastating result from that case. So that's what no-knock warrants are. And we've seen efforts like in the city council in Louisville, specifically taking efforts to ban no-knock warrants.
So Brett, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the proposals in Congress to specifically address no-knock warrants and why this reform is important from a public safety and law enforcement perspective?
Sure. This reform right now is seriously I would say one of the more important reforms that the country needs to look at. I mean, we see all the emotion around it. We see the protests, riots, reactions to decisions by prosecutors. All of that sort of stems from this unrest that we have when police power is utilized. I happen to think that conservatives should be embracing this kind of reform. And I do so because conservatives have traditionally been very leery of the police power and its overuse or its extended use. And, Rachel cited the Breonna Taylor case. Look, I'm here to tell you, I disagree with using a no-knock warrant on a drug case. Absolutely not. If you're trying to find somebody that's distributing drugs, you don't need it. You don't need it. There's not that big of a risk that they're gonna throw cocaine down the toilet and you're gonna lose the case. Give me a break. That's an artificial argument that's created to protect the tactics that they're using. Now, if it's national security, terrorism, or to stop an impending homicide or rape or something of that nature, perhaps. But what we've done is extended the use of no-knock. So it does need to be reformed and reined in, and I support that. There are other things like looking at qualified immunity, looking at the use of chokeholds, looking at this standard that police officers are operating under when they are allowed to use force. What is the definition of deadly force, and how has it been that the courts have expanded and slowly given too much power to law enforcement to get away with improper conduct? I talked to some of my police chief friends and some sheriffs, and they'll be the first ones to say they acknowledge there are officers that are making bad decisions. There are officers they would like to get rid of, but it's very difficult to do so. And because of the protections that we've allowed to grow, what I want to see is a system where prosecutors and police officers can be held personally accountable to such a degree, not that it debilitates their ability to work in their job, but to such a degree that they take perhaps a more thoughtful approach to some of these things, and we don't start expanding this power so that tragedies like Breonna Taylor occur.
Yeah, well said. So we've covered many different topics, right, that have spanned all three branches of government. We've talked about touch on the presidential race, the SCOTUS seat, Congress, coronavirus, policing. There's a lot, obviously, that needs to get done, a lot going on. What would you say are the top things that you think that on the federal level need to happen in short order? To both of you.
Well, a lot of what we talked about today. And, it's easy for us when we're thinking about reform, when we're thinking about bills, it's easy for us to look at numbers, to look at data. But these are human beings, these are lives, these are people, these are communities who right now, for them, it's not an option. They are suffering from being incarcerated, being at risk of COVID-19, being at risk of law enforcement use of force. It is impacting communities every day. And that's why we see the unrest. That's why we see people talking about it and getting out and protesting, because it is something that matters, and it's something that is vital and important for our democracy. I would love to see Congress obviously focus on the Supreme Court seat. We need jurisprudence that we can trust. We need a Supreme Court that we can have faith in. And I would love to see Congress pass legislation to assist with decarceration efforts. There's a lot being talked about expanding compassionate release, about a lot of what Brett talked about today. And specifically when it comes to law enforcement, we can't miss this opportunity where the world is looking at this conversation right now. And people from all sides of the political spectrum are having this conversation about re-envisioning what law enforcement means, what it looks like. We have law enforcement saying we want to re-envision what this looks like, and how we are being given the burden to pretty much handle all of society's problems, and it's not our job. There's a lot on Congress's plate, but they can do it. That's why we elect them. And so, I would just end all of this with a little push as well to vote. Everyone must get out there and vote. This is a very important couple of months. And it's in Congress's hands. It's also in our hands. And we have to do what we can to step into these places and push the reforms and make our voices heard.
So I would just echo everything that Rachel said. I agree with it. I would follow up with, for me, Congress quickly passed something that addresses the prison and the impact of COVID. Just do it. Get it in one of the bills. Put it in there. It's not complicated. You don't need to have a lot of debate on it. Get it in there so that there are resources. That addresses the acute problem that we have. And then I'd love to see them turn to police reform. The reason I do is I think that the country is really aching for that, and we need it. We need to show that the adults are in the room and they're going to look at what the police officers are doing, and we're not going to let a police officer kneel on somebody's neck, but we're also not going to defund and take down a police department. But instead, we're going to come together like adults, and we're going to say, let's make some changes so the communities feel better about what the police, is going to be doing in my neighborhood. For me, it's those two things. It's simple, but nothing's easy.
Yeah, well, let's certainly, we'll all keep pushing to try to make some of these reforms happen this year, the same way that we did last year and the year before. So there is hope. Thank you both for your time today and for all of the incredible work that you do every day to advance bipartisan criminal justice reform. As these other political issues are taking center stage in Washington, it's incredibly important that we don't forget those who are behind bars. And the Justice Action Network and all of our partners will continue to push for these kinds of reforms at the federal and state level. And this discussion was incredibly informative. Thank you both so much for providing your perspectives, especially since you're on opposite sides of the political spectrum. It's nice to see where there's a lot of agreement. So thank you, Rachel and Brett. And to everyone else, please be sure to tune in next week to our next episode of Unconventional. Thank you.
Thank you, Anamai.
Thanks, Anamai. See you.